I heard that all you need to live in a beautiful home with large windows that frame the sea is to put in hard work and speak with others honestly. You'll succeed in all the ways that let you thrive. But remember,
Hey everyone, welcome to the newest episode of On That Note with Parker Whirling. Today's guest is an alternative rock singer-songwriter, producer, and multi-instrumentalist based in New York City. He's got a song out right now called I Heard with an awesome accompanying music video, and I even saw him live in 2015 opening for Cold War Kids. Before we get started, please make sure to like and subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, all that good stuff. And on that note, please welcome Elliot Moss. Elliot Moss, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate you coming on an episode of On That Note. I've been a fan of yours for a good while now, so it's pretty awesome to be talking to you. But the first question I wanted to ask you was when I was watching your music video for your newest single, I Heard, and the making of, I saw that you did the whole thing in quarantine with your dad. How was that process working on a whole music video with your dad?
Well, I mean, we were already quarantining together anyway, and so I think like it sort of gave us something to do as opposed to just trying to think of things that need to be built right now out of plywood to like fill 6 hours of a day. Um, but yeah, it was really cool. I mean, as we were planning it and kind of like Matt Genesis, the director, and I sort of conceived of this crazy thing that would utilize all the different rooms in the house and kind of whatever the available equipment was to make something that looks like a real music video was the idea. And during that process, it hadn't really occurred to me how like heavy and huge and annoying and cumbersome like some of these rigs would be. And so like once they were really in my living room, I was just incredibly grateful to like have somebody who was just down to help move things until like midnight basically every day for a week.
Right. And not just down, but he used to do film stuff, right?
Yeah, he went to film school for a while, and then he dropped out to do. He's like a producer engineer for a lot of different records, and I guess that's sort of where his focus ended up. But film has always had a soft spot in his heart, so it was kind of fun to get to mess around with that a little bit with him.
Yeah, that's got to be a cool bonding experience. Have you ever done anything like that with him before with your music?
I have actually Silver and Gold too. I mean, that was a bigger shoot because there was no COVID, and so I hired out a DP and co-directed it with my friend Kevin Condon. But Dad still just came to help with whatever needed doing and kind of like assume the role of key grip or something kind of halfway through the day, and was flying lights and rigging and doing all the things that dads do. So yeah, no, he's always like a great vibe to have around, and it's fun that family doesn't need to be this separate thing from what I do.
Yeah. Shout out to supportive dads everywhere, really. So when I was watching the making of the music video, one thing really struck me that is something that I've talked about with artists on this show, which is embracing the limitations that you have. And you really did that because you guys were doing this whole shoot via Zoom, other than you and your dad in person, but it's in your house, right? But
Right.
everyone else is like across the country. So what were some of, the rewards of doing that and some things that you did not expect to have to deal with?
Well, I mean, I guess like the biggest thing for me, or the biggest unforeseen for me, was the size and just overall aggravation that like this huge camera equipment can cause in a tiny house, because it's not a big house. We're actually in the only room that we didn't shoot in right now, which is my studio upstairs. And we rented something called an Arri SkyPanel S60, which is like it's like the size of like a big plasma screen, but also 50 pounds ish on this huge stand. And it would be like, oh, let's move it into this room. Oh, let's move it into this room. Oh, let's move it into this. Like, by the third one, you're winded and just trying to figure out, how the hell you're going to make it to midnight. And, it took a little bit of buckling down and just like uh, basically sucking it up and saying like, all right, I guess I'm gonna like be the grip and then immediately like wipe all of the sweat off my face and then be in the shot because like there's no one else here to do it. And it's like that was probably the hardest aspect of it, was just the manual labor that was involved because we had nobody helping us, and it just sort of became this mess that kept growing and growing and growing as we pushed things off to the sides and made room for different shots. But the most rewarding thing was, when the robotic camera rig would really nail a shot. We'd spend 45 minutes setting up some sort of a crazy move with like, my dad moving a light at just the right moment, and like this like things just sort of like all balanced and hopefully going to work. And then like you'd hit play and I'd walk through the whatever the blocking was, and then it would work, and everyone would cheer on Zoom, and it was like this happy little celebration. So it was really exciting when we actually pulled it off. So yeah, that was fun.
That's so cool. And watching the camera move on the dolly via remote from across the country was like, man, there's no excuse to not do anything. Like the fact that you guys made something this cinematic and beautiful, and 90% of the people involved were not even in the house, and it easily holds up to the rest of your music videos. It doesn't stand out as like a lesser like produced video. It really hits that same mark. And watching all of your music videos, I did notice that they are all very cinematic. You obviously enjoy films and enjoy coloring, which is really cool. What do you have any influences of directors or certain movies that you feel like have shaped the way you approach music videos?
I think music videos sort of like, they almost like sit outside like what I would, if you could call it an education, what I would consider like my education in film, like because that's so centered around these long form pieces that take a long time to unfold and develop in these really sort of amazing and complex ways, like a David Fincher film, or like an Orson Welles film or something, where there's like there's a lot of data there, and there's a lot of unpacking to be done if you really want to kind of understand every scene and why things were done. And like I think in the 3.5 minutes that you get to make a music video, there's if you try to fit too much into there, everything falls apart, and if you don't have enough, everything falls apart. And so it's like finding that sweet spot and like the correct amount of data per second, I guess, if you could look at it that way, to make it engaging but not overwhelming. That for me really makes them successful. And so I feel like there's a director, Ali Vidal, who's been doing a lot of amazing videos, who I think she's really just nailed it over and over again. Has whatever understanding one needs to sort of like live in the rhythm of a music video and build out a world that can actually be transmitted to the viewer in that amount of time, as opposed to trying to be too ambitious or not ambitious enough.
Ali Vidal, that's her name?
Yeah.
Cool. I'm going to go check her out. That sounds really awesome. Are you sick of pancakes now after doing that video?
I've never liked them.
Oh my God, dude, there are so many pancakes.
I know, and I can't make a pancake either. And so like the ones that you see there are like just like the most pancake looking pancakes, but
Right.
you would not have wanted to eat those.
Yeah, those are the hero pancakes. Those are the ones that made the shot.
Yeah, they're just props.
So listening to your music over the last 5 years, I've noticed a lot of like imagery and physical imagery, like specifically like bend my body into shapes. On your song July 4th, you say twist my body. And it got me wondering, like, it has such physical imagery. Do you look at songwriting in a certain way, like a battle or like, like a boxing match, like kind of going toe to toe with the muse in a way?
That's a cool way of thinking about it. I think I maybe look at the process that way. Sure. Like at least I don't know about it being a boxing match, but it being like an event with a beginning and an end, and sort of subscribing to the idea that there's there's something to be had there, and I need to just get it and finish, as opposed to like it being this thing I can continue coming back to over and over and over again. And it's like a spark, something fleeting. And when you fail, it's because you spent too much time going down some avenue that wasn't the right one, and then the thing falls apart in your hands. And so like there's I guess I look at it as like a maze, kind of. And if you make too many wrong turns, then you kind of run out of time. um and I mean, I guess not a boxing match, because that's a little bit more violent, and you react more, whereas in a maze, I think it's just like you're all alone, and it's kind of up to your gut to decide whether you take a left or a right. And over the years, developing the inclinations to take more correct turns, I think, and solve more mazes, is like kind of what helps me get better at writing music. But I mean, there's always days where I fuck up 10 in a row and go get an iced coffee and quit.
So over the years of doing this, have you gotten more in tune with when you've realized something is like you got to drop it and move on to something else?
Yeah, I'm quicker to drop things. It's if something doesn't feel right, maybe I can save it, but I almost feel like it's a better use of time to just drop the thing and go into a completely new room and see if I can get something out of that. Because like one of my biggest pet peeves in songwriting in general, whether it be mine or someone else's, is if something sounds labored over, if something sounds like you tried really hard. Like there's like famously in rock music, there's the bridge that sounds like a bridge. And
Yeah.
like I don't ever want to write a bridge that sounds like a bridge, and I have, and I don't want to talk about it, but I that's where it falls apart for me, is where you've lost the little movie that's playing inside someone's head, and instead you've drawn a picture of the person writing a song, and that's where it like where the device you're creating fails to execute its purpose. And so that's I kind of meandered real hard there, but I guess the main point that I'm making is it's like I don't want to ever out myself as the songwriter, and instead I want you to, as quickly as possible, lose yourself in what's happening, and then whether you choose to come back to it or not is one thing, but like, because maybe you didn't like it at all, but I think still, like, even if you hate the music, I would like for it to still have gotten its point and its image and its symbolism across.
Forcing something in songwriting is like a surefire way to kill it, to make it not interesting anymore. Was there a song that you can remember when you first started writing it that you were like, this is it, like I know in my gut that this is front to back, it's done, like relatively quickly, compared to maybe some others that you labored too much on?
Yeah, definitely. Well, there's literally a song called Plastic 2, which is
Right, on the first album.
that came after Plastic, which I never put out. That
Oh, that's
song,
funny.
it kicked around for, I don't even want to know. I think that song it's a fun groove, but I mean, aside from that, it doesn't really do much for me anymore. And that's just because it was like born out of trying to iterate the same thing over and over until it was somehow acceptable to like my production sensibilities. But like, to answer your question, like Dogcatcher off the new record I wrote in 15 minutes, and I love that one. Best Light off the first record I wrote in 20 minutes. That, I mean, those still end up being my favorite ones, because they kind of happen like a little spark and then they're gone. And if you actually are in the right mood and context to capture that, then you win. And I think there have been a lot more cases where I wasn't, and I've lost things like that. But those are the ones that actually survived. And I don't know, I'm trying to think, like, Without the Lights is a funny song, because that, like, the final version of that is like version 275, but at like 271 I like gutted the entire thing except for the vocal and just started over, and actually had this moment of like, wow, I made a new song. And if you heard like the like horrible labored over version versus like this magic 25 minutes of Eureka, it's very funny, because like it's almost impossible for me to do that usually. Like I'm usually once something is made, it's very hard to undo it and like kind of like approach it anew. And for some reason, it worked that day, which is the only reason that song exists.
I was listening to Rick Rubin talk about like the spark. I forgot who he was talking to in his interview, but like when you get this spark, or you find this spark when you're writing a new song, that you want to make sure you remember that feeling as you continue to work on it, because you can just get used to working on something that, over the course of days or weeks, maybe you've forgotten what that spark feels like, and suddenly you don't feel that way about your song anymore. So that's cool that even after 271 versions of, this one song, that the 272nd one is what made you find that spark again.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that's interesting about a spark is that it's not a spark in linear time at all. It's the spark that's going to be there the whole time, and then we're entering the maze and we're going away from the spark, hoping that we find the end of the maze. But like, in a tune like that, it's just a couple of lucky turns, and actually, I was able to save it. But there's, I don't know. I like, a friend of mine called it like the intention once, and preserving the intention, and always like making sure that whatever you do is in service of the original intent of what you were trying to say or do or accomplish. And that's just something that echoes in my mind as I work all the time, and helps to sort of ground a thought or bring it back home, or prevent me from going off on some sort of a silly adventure that is just going to end up hurting things, even though it seems fun to plug in all my modular synths and make them make crazy noises, because it's great. But if it doesn't have to do with kind of the main goal, then I've over the years been better at swatting the sort of things that seem fun in the moment, in favor of the things that sort of are in service to the tune as a whole, and kind of what it belongs, or what it's supposed to be like in the end.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Getting lost down that rabbit hole of just playing with scents and random things that aren't really gonna like get you that much further that you need to go.
Yeah, well, and especially like, you risk stumbling upon that banana peel of a sound or a production element that just sends the whole thing. Like, you lose half a day going in some direction that you shouldn't have gone in, because this one little, boom sound or something is just like completely throws off the whole mood. But like, you felt like you needed to develop the idea, even though it makes no sense. And yeah, I'm guilty of that one. That's why you save incrementally. That's why I've got 270.
Yeah, very true. And it helps for me to show people certain songs along the way, depending on how I really feel about it. And then they could be like, that bonk sound, take it out, dude. It's not working. So moving on to your live tape shows. You've done a lot of them, which is crazy. And they're always so well produced. And then I looked at the liner credits, and you are not only obviously have written and recorded and performed the music, but you're also directing it and editing it and coloring it. So how do you wear all those hats at once when you have 50 something people on set to manage?
That was a pretty big set, but we basically, Dave Grill and Vicky Corbalis, who were doing the lights, also brought along all of their students, and the kids that were like a part of the lighting program, and sort of appointed a few of them as like, sort of pseudo AC or pseudo PA, roles. And then they would make sure that like their subgroups were organized and managed, and they did a wonderful job of just sort of keeping each other on track. But in between, every single song for Black Box was a different, completely different build out in terms of the cameras and the lighting and the grid. And we would essentially take 3 or 4 takes at something and look at the schedule and say, all right, we got to move on, and strike all the dollies and go again. And it was, I think, 14 of these Blackmagic cameras that would sort of just go in wherever we could stick them in half an hour that looked cinematic and made sense. I mean, it was like I had some blocking, but it all went out the window as soon as we saw the lights, because we wanted to just make things seem sort of authentic, and like, you're really getting to see the people play as opposed to like watching a movie, because that's exciting for a little while and then it gets boring, I feel like. And so it sort of aired on the side of getting cameras like closer to being in people's faces and like really watching what they were doing, because we were going through the trouble to really record the thing, so we wanted to show that it was real. But yeah, it's funny, like when you're like directing a live thing and being in it, it's like both sides of the brain going at once. And I found myself just sitting there playing piano and then playing Barricade or something, and just really hoping that the boom operator would go up right on the chorus or something, and like, because I knew that in the edit that would save me or something. I could go, I mean, it was a weird space to be in, and not one that I'd want to be in all the time, because it's fun to kind of just lose yourself in performing a song. But I kind of had to emulate losing myself, and at the same time like have my notes for the edit after each tune, and which cameras were in the right place when. And we did a few things to with Barricade especially, to sort of give us more options, where we would take like a string intro multiple times and set up cameras in a few different blocking shapes, just to sort of have more coverage. But aside from that, it was really just these big long linear takes of tunes that we needed to sort out later, and I just wanted to make sure that we got everything as authentically as possible.
Yeah, it takes a lot of trust in, the people you've surrounded yourself with for that day, to make sure everybody's doing what they got to do, and you can't stress it, because you have to do that one job right now, and just trust that everyone else is doing theirs correctly as well. And you mentioned you're working on string arrangements. What was that like with working with Alba Torimoka? I think that's how you pronounce her name. That must have been really interesting, having songs without strings and then working with somebody, figuring out how to add them in a way that it complements the song.
Yeah, well, I mean, so speaking of trust, she's the one who she wrote the horn arrangements for Dogcatcher on the record, and has, what else? Like, I mean, we've oh well, I heard also the horns on that. I mean, but basically anytime you hear horns or strings recently, it's been her. And it was kind of a no-brainer to say, hey, these 4 tunes or 5 tunes, whatever it is, they need the sort of same flavor arrangements that we've been doing, but for a quartet, and can you do that? And she just jumped on it like no problem. The strings were kind of one of the easiest things, which is usually not the case for a production like this. But I mean, when you have somebody who's just manning that station for you, it's really comforting, because you can focus onto other things, like figuring out how to get the little music stands with the lights on them so people don't get mad.
That's a big key important part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd be crazy not to mention how I found out about you 5 years ago, when I watched you perform opening for Cold War Kids live at Buckhead Theater in 2015 in Atlanta.
Oh,
and
cool.
Yeah, I was so stoked to see you. I love Cold War. Sorry, it's a loud ass motorcycle outside. Oh, wait a second. Okay. So yeah, I saw you live 2015 at the Buckhead Theater opening for Cold War Kids. And that's how I first heard about you. You were playing your first record. And I bought the CD immediately after the show. And it became kind of like my senior year driving to and from school album. So I just got to ask, what was it like touring with Cold War Kids? I was a huge fan of them. Did you learn anything from them? If you could go back in time and tell yourself anything, or give yourself any advice during that time, what would you go back and say?
I would tell myself to quit worrying so much about what we look like. I when we that was only our 6th or 7th show ever when we started our tour with Cold War Kids, and so I was still in the like, are we a real band phase, and like I still had it fresh in my mind. We played Rough Trade with Not a Surf like not too long before that, and I'm like eating pizza in the restaurant next door and just wondering like, what's anyone gonna say when we start playing? Do we even sound like a band? Are we real? Like what? Just because I'd never played a show in my life. I'd never sang in front of anyone. I don't know what my voice sounds like when it hits off the back wall of a venue. Like everything was brand new, and so it was still all brand new when we started in Denver with Cold War Kids way back when, and I wish I could have just told myself to sort of, quit worrying about all that and just like go enjoy yourself, because like that's the most addictive and attractive thing for people watching too, is just seeing somebody up there doing what they love and having a good time and not worrying about them because that it doesn't then no one's having fun. So yeah, I mean, since then, I've gotten better at just sort of removing myself from the situation and like, kind of going to the same musical place every night as opposed to being so affected by my surroundings. So that was that, and to take more pictures, because I don't have a lot of pictures from that tour, and it would have been nice.
Yeah, more memories, more
Yeah.
pictures. We're all our worst critics too. Was there like how have you managed to improve at that, to improve at staying in the moment and not worrying so much what others are thinking while you're playing?
I think it's there's something about the 10,000 hours there, and I mean it certainly isn't 10,000 hours yet, but like doing it enough that you get sick of your own fears and like the little tripwires that kind of await you every time you enter a stage. Like you each time you do it, you get over all of those little things faster, and then by the time you've done your third or fourth tour, then it's within halfway through the first song, you're already done worrying about the fact that some guy's crossing his arms in the back, and that whole half of the room is just on their phone or something. Like you can just sort of accept the fact that we're going to play for an hour and we're going to enjoy it, and then that's the best thing that we can do. It's worrying about what other people are doing is not the best thing that I can be doing when I'm playing a show. But amazing how long it took to sort of come to that conclusion. So yeah, I mean, I guess like the way I've gotten better at it is just by getting over all of those little fears and annoyances much faster, and like kind of remembering the little indicators or the little signs of getting sucked into the fun of it, and sort of following them, I guess, more immediately than I would because I'd be too busy worrying.
Very well said. And that really does take patience and practice. There's not much else you can do about it. You just got to put in the work there. So we're just going to go over to the last 5 questions now. I'm just going to ask you 5 quick questions and we'll be out of here. All right. Number 1 is in the studio or playing live?
Studio, because it's how I grew up.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, well.
Yeah, obviously you got all the gear, man. That's so sick.
Yeah, it's my dad was, or is a recording engineer and producer, and I would go home after school or skip halfway through school and go to his studio and just hang out with whatever band was there, which turned into engineering there and turned into like doing the radio shows or whatever, whatever I could do to be behind faders, basically my whole life. I did. And so, sometimes he'll actually come out on the road with us and mix the band, which is a lot of fun. And it's kind of new and weird and exciting for both of us to worry about live sound, because like at first the whole thing seemed ridiculous. Like, we're just doing this once and then it's going away. Like, if I'm going to bother doing a mix, it should come out, it's just really funny. And like kind of like as we do it more and more, we kind of celebrate the into the cosmosness of doing live performance, and it's sort of addictive in that way, because it almost doesn't matter how it goes, because no matter what, it's going to go and then it's going to be over, as opposed to music where it's very much more up to the artist to stop or start the things that happen.
Interesting way of looking at it. I've never heard somebody explain how it connects like that, how you've brought your studio mindset into the live world.
Yeah, it's interesting because it seems like it's the same thing, but it's really not. And mixing for live also is, I mean, I won't get too much into that, but it's way more about just flooring the bass and making it fun than, I mean, in the studio you have to restrain yourself and ask if this really is important, and live it's just like, blah.
Just have fun.
Yeah, do it, shake people, it's fun. Yeah, it's
That's
great.
awesome. So, question number 2 is, what do you think is a perfect album front to back?
The one right behind you in Rainbows.
Oh, dude, yes. It is my favorite album probably of all time. I also love Ram, but when I was watching one of your interviews, I can't remember who it was with. Somebody asked you what your desert island album was, and you said Chaos and Creation in the Backyard. And I had no idea that Paul McCartney did a collaboration with Nigel Godrich from Radiohead. So I immediately went and listened to it, and it's awesome. I can't believe I was sleeping on it for this long.
Yeah, that's another one that I would call, but I couldn't resist the In Rainbows in your background. Yeah, that record as well. I mean, it's just stunning. Every single second of it makes you just wish you wrote it, and then at the same time feel ridiculous for wishing that because it's Paul McCartney.
Right. It's like you can't compare yourself to that guy. Come on.
No.
So, do you have a favorite In Rainbow song?
Oh man, Reckoner maybe.
Interesting. Reckoner. I like that one. It's never been my favorite though. I just feel like compared to like All I Need, I love All I Need, and House of Cards honestly is also a great tune. But I can't put down any song on that album for real.
Reckoner for me, it's because I've got a little story associated with it, which is, when they put out In Rainbows. I wasn't following it when that really happened, but like a year or so later, like the stems for that song leaked out or came out on iTunes or something. I don't remember how I ended up with them, but it sort of was a little studio education because I got to pick apart that song and listen to the guitars separately and the drums separately and the vocals separately, and like really it's one of those mixes that when you listen to things one at a time, you're like, really, that's how this is made. And then it all comes together and you just sort of hear the brilliance that is Nigel Godrich's production. And
Wow.
it was a big sort of, it was a very formative moment for me as like a teenager just trying to understand how to record drums, and to sort of come to the conclusion all by myself in my room that, like, things, 2 + 2 does not necessarily equal 4, to say it in Radiohead terms. Like
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Sometimes it equals 5. Who knows?
it's like the way that he does it, it's like half there and half not. Like there's these phantom elements that your brain fills in his production, and I think that's one of the most beautiful things about how he accomplishes what he does, Nigel. Because there's just as much missing as there is there, and the maturity and the sort of like the development that I think a producer needs to have gone through to get to that point is it just blows my mind. It's like watching just a virtuoso do his thing, and it was fun to get to pick it apart.
Wow, that's got to be such a cool experience. I've never listened to, the isolated tracks, but that makes so much sense what you said about how your brain kind of fills in the sounds that aren't actually there. And it really takes a genius to know what is so essential and what is just fluff. Because that whole album, there's not one sound that doesn't fit. You know what I mean? Everything has a purpose, and it really, like, it's pretty minimal for like the whole album. It's very minimal, especially compared to something like OK Computer, where there's so many guitars, and it's pretty amazing, honestly.
Yeah, it's one of my sort of template records in terms of, like, how it's done. And so you know
I
it
feel like I've heard, sorry to interrupt you. I just feel like I've heard, now that you say that, I see that mindset kind of coming in more and more as your albums have progressed. Do you feel like over time you've like uh, tried to approach things that way a little bit more and more?
absolutely, yeah. I mean, everything having a purpose just feels better. It doesn't want. I guess, something like its purpose can be it inspired you to write this section. That's fine. It doesn't need to be because it's, part of solving the Higgs boson or something. Like it can be a simple reason that it's there, but things that are superfluous really they add up so much faster than the things that are meant to be there, and I think they can really cover up your, to take it back to the intention. They can distract you and the listener from that and really hurt what you're doing. And more recently I've just sort of tried to guarantee myself that if I'm going to add something, it's because it belongs, and it there is something to it that is really bringing some positivity to the production, because otherwise it really does start to just sound like a bunch of sounds to me. That's the stuff that I end up deleting a lot.
Got to know what to pick and choose. So number 3, who's your dream artist or producer to work with?
Oh my God. Maybe, well, Nigel Godrich is too obvious, and so I'm not gonna.
Yeah. Now that we've talked about him, he's out.
We already gave him his 5 minutes.
Exactly.
Maybe Adrian Utley of Portishead.
Oh, okay. I've heard of Portishead. I listened to a few songs off of their big album, whatever the one that's blue.
Dummy. Yeah.
Dummy. Yes. And it is really cool, but I feel like it's one of those albums I need to come back to a few more times to really get into.
And it takes being in the right mood for that record in particular. It's like it's a good rainy record, but I think, that's another example of just everything being there for a reason, and there being like, little to no superfluous content. I think, the way that Adrian approached like sound design, and also making sure that Beth's composition and songwriting was still the sort of at the center of everything, is like a skill that I think a lot of people, particularly when music was, when Dummy was made, it was, trip hop was like this thing where it was like the vibe of trip hop was enough to like make your record sound cool and be successful. And then like there were people that were doing like it in a really sort of progressive way, like Bjork or Massive Attack, and then there were people that I won't name doing it just sort of in like a copycat way. And I think he bridged that sort of like really authentic trip hop flavor with some sort of like just really, really vulnerable, like to a scary point songwriting that Beth was willing to bare her soul, like over these sort of crazy beats that Adrian whipped up. And the fact that they could understand each other and make something beautiful that sounded brand new makes that record really special to me.
So cool. Now you're getting me hyped. I got to go check it out again. One or a couple artists I thought of when I asked this was I feel like you'd work really well with someone like 1-0-Tricks Point Never. I don't know if I'm saying the name right, but I feel like you guys would come up some really cool shit. And also Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross.
Anytime.
Let's set it up.
Yeah, if you got their email, absolutely. I'm down.
Yeah, I'll hit you up with it. But definitely, I feel like you guys could do something like like an A24 film score or something.
Book of Eli, Atticus Ross's score, was like one of the first film scores that got me all hyped about film score when I was younger. And like the kind of crazy Blade Runner noises meets like this like decaying desert pad landscape thing. Like I didn't think that shit was allowed, and it was really fun to hear. So I actually heard of Atticus Ross before Trent Reznor, weirdly, and then then sort of understood the connection later. But
that's cool. Yeah, they're such a great duo. I love the Social Network. What do you call it? The Social Network score, for sure. So question number 4 is, what's on your musical rotation right now?
Right now, oh my God, I like honestly like a lot of like crazy string stuff and ambient stuff, like a lot of Oliver Arnold's, however you say his name. Octeer, or however you say that. Like kind of
A lot of weird names.
yeah, Aphex Twins, like ambient stuff.
Yeah, Aphex Twin sick.
Like just kind of I'm trying to like study texture and sort of stuff that feels like thick but like well defined, kind of, especially like the Aphex's ambient works are like an amazing combination of like these like almost like nauseating gross noises sometimes, but like they're just beautiful at the same time. And like um it makes my understanding of synthesis and sound design feel really simplistic, and I feel uneducated compared to that stuff. So I'm just trying to wrap my brain around what he's doing, and maybe bring that into some songwriting, talking about parts that belong and that like kind of really have roots. Like, and I don't want my pads or keyboards that are just super washy to be only that. I want them to sort of have come from somewhere special, like I feel like his stuff does. And so yeah, I mean, I guess I'm into like a lot of Arca as well too, like stuff that like kind of really graduated sound design has been super attractive to me lately.
Nice. I've tried to get into Arca pretty recently. I liked her new album Kick Eye, and I also checked out, I forgot the one before that, but that one did really well with the critics. It's like the Creepy Face. I
I
mean,
think
they all have creepy faces on it, really.
isn't it just called Arca? I could be wrong.
I think, yeah, it might just be her self-titled album. But yeah, those, I mean, it sounds like a lot of great sound designers are kind of your influences.
At least now, yeah. I mean, it's just um that's always been a massive appeal of electronic music in general to me, is that it's so new still. And I feel like every 3 years we figure out some new movement or some new uh, like direction that like all of these people take together, and it sort of has this like massive community, maybe because it's also so rooted in the internet. And I just don't see a lot of other things working that way. And it's kind of fun to watch it develop, and to try to um, sort of mimic its curiosity as a genre, but as a creator. It's like, how do I broaden myself in the way that the genre that I owe my allegiances to does? So that
That's true. It kind of reminds me of Vaporwave. Vaporwave was like such a huge thing, and like everyone was doing that for a few years.
right. Well, that Drive movie too really helped.
Oh, yeah. Shout out to Drive.
Do 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 do.
So speaking of movies, my last question here is tailored more to your colorist editor side. What do you think are some of the most visually stunning films out there?
Oh, oh my God. Well, I mean, I think there's kind of two sides to that. Like, I guess on the super duper Hollywood end, like there's movies like Mad Max. Like, I mean, if we're talking color, where it's just that's one of the like the bravest, craziest color decisions I've ever seen made in a movie. And it works so well. It's like you're watching a comic book, but at the same time, it has like this incredible depth to every single shot. I don't even want to think about how many CG shots are in that movie, but they pull it off. And like the sort of the midpoint where it just goes so blue for like half an hour, and it's like the fact that they were able to that was like able to happen and actually make it to theaters like that, and didn't have anybody who chickened out and said, oh, it might be a little blue, can we see some bring it a little bit back to natural, like. And I adore that, and I think that it like that's a great super duper kind of crazy Hollywood example. And then I think still for me, like in the like every cinematography and lighting book that I read still just makes reference of Orson Welles and like Citizen Kane, and just the sort of incredibly highfalutin understanding of perspective and uh, the way that he used light to basically tell the whole story without anyone opening their mouths. And I think that um, that's just sort of moved through cinema as the years have gone on. But I mean, I think most people still go back and look at what he was doing, and try to have things be that meaningful and that powerful to boot. And like, particularly like, with his like ultra long, incredibly long focus lenses, having somebody like, walking in the background the whole time the two characters are talking in the foreground, and having it all be in focus is like this. It's like watching a painting or something, but this guy pulled it off, and before we even had computers. And I think that that type of forward thinking makes his stuff just so addictive. Like you just keep kind of coming back and coming back and coming back and noticing new things.
It's amazing that some of the greats from 20, 30, 40 years ago are still celebrated. Like, Stanley Kubrick, like that guy was so forward thinking and out there and strange, and every shot is beautiful. And it's crazy. Like it's better than, 90% of films that come out now, because he had just such an amazing understanding of what he was doing.
The opening to 2001, I remember the first time I saw that, every time the shot would change to like a different landscape, I would just go, fuck. Just the top of my lungs, just having never seen this before, and just like blowing my doors in. Like yeah, I mean, there's some stuff that's been around and stays around for a reason, and Kubrick for sure. But yeah, I mean, like there's just so many little things you'd never notice with what he does as well, that just like the techniques and the like the school that he built like has not changed at all that's changed is that we shoot digital now, and that lights are LEDs, and there's computers, but like the way that like those guys established rhythm and story and being able to get a point across in a way that feels amazing is that's, I think, why we go back and study people like that. Amy Heckerling too. Oh my God.
Who is this?
Amy Heckerling also.
And what has she done? I've never heard of her.
She's was like a contemporary of David Lynch and a bunch of stuff. Like,
oh, cool.
Actually, a friend of mine sort of knows her, I guess, but I'm trying to see where she's from, because I think she's from around here. Sorry, I realize we're not in the same place, but
no, you're good.
A friend of mine was just talking about how she like lives around the corner, and I got curious for a second. But yeah, like she, it's like Clueless Baby Talk Film School, but a friend of David Lynch's growing up too. I mean, another person who's just absolutely unbelievable. I feel like all these people like grew up in this time of like getting to, I don't know, like trying to like go so far out there to like capture an idea and like bring it back to earth. David Lynch being the king of that.
Yes, absolutely.
But there is this like really sort of like basic string tying all these emotions together, and just the way that some of the more out there directors can help show that, or like kind of stitch it into a story. I think it's something that I take back to songwriting, where it's like maybe there can be all of these crazy sounds or ideas, or like 4 crazy words that don't seem to interrelate, but like how do you frame it so it makes sense?
Right. And it's such a balancing act. You're never gonna, it's like getting that perfect middle ground is very hard, but the more you work on it and the more you practice at it, you just get closer and closer to that perfect point. Awesome. Well, Elliot Moss, that's our time here on That Note. I'm so excited I got to talk to you and pick your brain about your music and how you view films. That was super cool for me, because I didn't know how much of a film buff you were. But everybody needs to go check out your single, I Heard, and the music video, which is so sick. The whole thing was done during quarantine. And yeah, like I said, man, thanks again for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Parker. It's great talking to you.
Slip through your slip.
Thank you again for joining me for another episode of On That Note with Parker Whirling. If you haven't yet, please make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube and Apple Podcasts, and you can even leave a comment down below to let me know who you're listening to. On that note, I'll see you guys next time.
Oh, slip through, yo, slip, slip, slip through.